America's center of power changed, and with it, the dynamics of the political landscape. The consequences will reverberate locally, in Florida, on Capitol Hill, and on the global stage. Voters demanded change on the issues that mattered most: the economy, immigration, and social issues. Now, News 4 Jax goes beyond the headlines with political analysts who provide unique context and perspective. Experts focused on the issues making headlines. This is Politics and Power.
President Trump is sending a message to dissenters, a chilling message. Law firms that opposed him are being forced to pony up. The nation's attorney general is changing the complexion of the Department of Justice. Members of the legal community say Trump's multi-pronged assault on the department, major law firms, and the judiciary undermine central tenets of the U.S. justice system. And they don't stop there. They say the damage, will be generational. At the root of the change, retribution. The main question, is what is happening a violation of the Constitution? Also, what does the future look like? Can the Justice Department regain its independence, or is this change generational? Welcome to Politics and Power. I'm Bruce Hamilton, and joining me is Jeremy Rosenthal, a nationally recognized prosecuting and defense attorney and legal analyst. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bruce. How are you?
I'm great. So let's start with what's going on with the why. During her confirmation hearings, before she won appointment to her position as Attorney General, Pam Bondi said in no uncertain terms, the partisanship, the weaponization will be gone. America will have one tier of justice for all. Bondi said only facts and law will dictate what happens in the DOJ. Is that what we're seeing?
You have to remember, Bruce, that this country, we can't even agree on the price of eggs. So I think that what you're seeing is that this is Miss Bondi and Donald Trump's worldview. I think if you were to talk to them and ask them, they would tell you that they truly believe that they have depoliticized this. They truly believe that they are above board and that it was the previous administration that was targeted. Even if you were to accept that logic, and even if you were to accept that is true, still, what they're doing would be even out of bounds by those standards. So it's really hard to kind of try to step into their shoes and to try to see it their way. In a lot of ways, their actions have been highly aggressive, highly confrontational, and don't have a whole lot of regard for the Constitution, regardless of how you see the previous administration. And anything that was done to you or anything that the previous administration does simply wouldn't justify this degree of assault.
Now, President Trump's first executive order, it involved the law firm of Perkins Coie, which represented Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. The legal community was in shock. Then the executive orders just kept coming, each complaining of a past hiring decision or client of the targeted firm. In some of the orders, Jeremy, Trump also accused the firms of being partisan in the clients they represented. The firm felt bullied, and to reduce the legal risk to Trump's policies, they cut a $40 million deal with the president to do free legal work. Other firms came up preemptively. Is the right of these firms to free speech being violated here?
Absolutely. Freedom of speech and freedom of expression. As an attorney, I have the right to defend or represent whoever I want. And there's no lawyer or there's no governmental agency that can tell me that I'm doing it right or that I'm doing it wrong. I can represent exclusively used car dealers if I want. I can represent exclusively abortion clinics if I want. I can represent abortion patients if I want. I can represent car accident injury victims. I can represent sex offenders. I can prosecute if I'm lucky enough to get a job doing that. The government doesn't get to tell me who and what I can do. So absolutely any type of executive order which uses as part of its basis the clientele of a law firm would absolutely violate the First Amendment protections. Moreover, it also violates other protections as well. Some more tangentially than others, the right to due process. Also, this notion that the executive can bar you from entering a federal courthouse and thereby limit your ability to practice law, where the state bar has never received a complaint and no judge has thrown you out of their courtroom, is also a little over the top as well.
So why did they pay? Because they would just be tied up in legal entanglements forever, and they would pay maybe even more over the long run?
This is Donald Trump 101, and it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, this law firm should do this or this law firm should do that. At a minimum, I can tell you that there has been a lot of shouting and yelling and very pointed emails going at the top of these bigger law firms. But this is Donald Trump 101. He knows how to make it hurt, and he knows where your pressure point is. Using the Department of Justice, using, if it's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, to investigate DEI practices, or if he wants to have the IRS target these law firms with some sort of a tax investigation. This is no different than him trying to levy tariffs against other countries, because he knows that that's their pressure point, and he knows that that's what's going to bring these law firms to take a knee and kiss the ring. The same as with the tariffs and having other countries do the same thing, or to have universities do the same thing by threatening their grant money. He knows where these law firms breathe, and they're hitting him hard. And these law firms have to look at the bottom line, and they have to say, look, even if we win some of these battles with the administration, our work is so entwined with the government. We defend too many patents that involve government work. We do too many mergers and acquisitions that require regulatory approval. We do too many things, and it's going to cost us too many clients. So we're just going to go ahead and kiss the ring and just cross our fingers and hope that we don't have to deal with Donald Trump in 4 more years.
So he knows how to create chaos.
I mean, he knows where your pressure point is, and this is all right out of Art of the Deal. Take an unreasonable first stance, and then Donald Trump knows better than anybody else how to use leverage to his advantage. And he is a person who has always had, virtually every time, more chips than the other guy. So he knows how to use it quite effectively. And again, he has put a lot of these law firms in a very uncomfortable spot, where they either have to kiss the ring or that they stand up and fight. And in maybe 5 years from now, maybe we look back at this as the McCarthy hearings in the 1950s, the people who named names versus the people who refused to go with the committee. But only time will tell how these things shake out.
Chris Christie, former New Jersey governor, former federal prosecutor, said in an interview with ABC, any suit that's filed against Trump's administration, Donald Trump will by definition believe it is frivolous and vexatious. If he continues to cave, if they continue to cave and be intimidated, well, then we're going to have a much different legal system in this country. The potential for damage, how extensive is it? And does it extend well beyond law firms?
This is where I think Donald Trump is really miscalculated. And this is where I think sometimes we give Donald Trump a little too much credit for some of his strategy. The legal profession is ubiquitous. These law firms are modular. Donald Trump is literally taking his fist and pounding it into the beach of sand. So while it's going to impact some top line law firms, while it's going to impact and chill a lot of people who may make their living by representing governmental entities, or it may cause somebody to think twice about representing somebody like Hillary Clinton. The fact is that lawyers are ubiquitous. We're everywhere. And you might be able to intimidate a handful of them. You might even be able to intimidate some law firms. But the fact is that the law firm of Perkins Coie tomorrow could be Perkins Coie Rosenthal. And these law firms are modular. If you take the labor and employment section at Perkins Coie or at Skadden, tomorrow they could be working under a completely different shop. So this is a fire that Donald Trump will never be able to put out. My money in this is on the legal profession. There are far too many of them for him to completely shut down. He can retaliate, and he can try to intimidate some of these law firms. But again, what he is doing is he is attacking a modular system that is just simply too complicated for him to effectively stamp out with these executive orders. He may eliminate some of these bigger law firms as they exist, and these law firms have duties to their existing shareholders and to their existing partnerships. But there is absolutely nothing from taking from some of these lawyers who do want to go work for Planned Parenthood and do want to give pro bono to them. Fine. They're just going to do it in their own individual capacity and not for the law firm, or they'll quit this law firm and go work for another law firm down the street. This is an impossible task for Mr. Trump to accomplish. And again, I think this is the equivalent of him pounding sand.
All right, so I hear and understand what you're saying. Don't the law firms targeted by the administration have First Amendment rights as well as constitutional rights being trampled on? And when I mention constitutional provisions, I can specifically ask about the Sixth Amendment and the right to counsel. For example, in the administration's case against Jenner and Block, the order hurts its ability to represent its clients in connection with government-facing work, undermines the attorney-client relationship, and clients' right to counsel of their choice. Or other firms have sued accusing Trump of denying them Fifth Amendment rights to due process and to receive equal protection of the laws because they didn't get a chance to defend themselves before being punished, and they were unfairly singled out. So the administration's defense is somebody had been employed or represented by the firm in question, or that firms in question allegedly discriminated on the basis of race in employment decisions, an apparent reference to the Supreme Court's ruling on affirmative action. Viable defense?
We have to take these different issues sort of one at a time. I think there's a very clear First Amendment violation saying that we don't like you because you represent too many people whose politics are adverse to us. There's absolutely a First Amendment issue there. When we take the Fifth Amendment, I think there's absolutely a Fifth Amendment issue there with regards to some of these law firms. In other words, you have punished us, Mr. Trump, without a hearing. You are targeting us, suspending us. You are sicking your attack dogs on us for no other reason than we are who we are. And we're entitled to some due process before the executive comes and hits us with a lightning bolt like this. I think that's a pretty viable argument. When you talk about the Sixth Amendment and your client's right to counsel, it's probably there as well. That's probably a violation as well. It's a little more complicated, though, because that's the client's right, not yours. And this is Donald Trump's whole plan, is to drive a wedge in between the client and the lawyer. And basically what Donald Trump is saying is, look, whoever you are, Planned Parenthood, sure, you got a right to come to court, and not to choose them out there. They may not be a client of any of these people. I'm just sort of arbitrarily picking a 501c3 out of the hat. But let's say somebody that Donald Trump doesn't like, he's not denying them the right to counsel. He's denying them the right of that lawyer. And again, I think that argument is probably still a good one for the law firms to sort of advance, but it's not as clear cut as the Fifth or the First Amendment. So I do think that these things kind of get muddy, but we have to remember that these law firms these are really big conglomerates, and they sort of are looking at the bottom line. They have fiduciary duty to their other law partners, and so that's why when we sort of get into the mud of some of these individual claims, the law firms are kind of making a bigger top line decision. Do we take a knee and bow and kiss the ring, or are we going to fight? And what's going to be in the best interest of this law firm going forward? And again, just to kind of bring it back to what we were talking about a little bit before, one thing that I think, and I don't know if Donald Trump appreciates this or not, but he's attacking a modular system of entities. Law firms are just amalgamations. They're groups of lawyers. You have a mergers and acquisitions section. You have a tax section. You have a regulatory section. You have a litigation section. And these compartments, they come and they go. And in fact, it's a cottage industry to carve out one group and take it and move the entire group to another law firm. Also, if you look at the law firm, there was a law firm called Bracewell Patterson. For a while, it was Bracewell Giuliani after Rudy Giuliani, and I don't believe it is that anymore. So there's nothing to suggest that if Donald Trump puts in his executive order, take a name, Perkins Coie, that the law firm couldn't morph into something different. Now, I don't know that they would just based on this. And there's just too much of a brush fire for the administration to really effectively stamp out, even with all of their resources.
And the reality is these executive orders are producing an outcry within the legal profession. And you have the Trump administration attacking the independence of the judiciary, threatening the impeachments of judges, threatening to discredit the judiciary itself. Who has the power to stand up to the administration and say, yo, government, you are wrong about this?
That's you and me, Bruce. That's the people. That's folks that are watching this. What the administration is gambling here is that Americans don't care. That's what they're banking on. They're banking on that you are too concerned with the price of eggs, that you are too inundated with the news cycles, that you are too into podcasts about dogs and cats or true crime or something else, that you're just not paying attention. If people care about this, they need to let their elected representatives know. That's how something potentially gets done about it. That means contacting your representative. That means contacting your senators. That means letting them know that, look, we're not happy with this. And we shouldn't have to trade in this country economic prosperity with civil liberties, but it almost seems like that's kind of what we're doing, is that the better the economy does and the more popular President Trump is, the more power he has to sort of do these things that really less people are paying attention to. But he's taking a gamble, and the gamble is that the people at home don't care.
Yeah, I wonder out loud, do enough people care? Too many people caught up in the propaganda that really isn't news?
Bruce, we have dueling information systems in this country. Close to half of this country thinks that Donald Trump was an unfair target, thinks that he got a raw deal, thinks that Joe Biden pinned his ears back and went after him unnecessarily or illegally. Now, the fact is that the court orders that it was Special Prosecutor Jack Smith, and I think Jack Smith would tell you that everything that he did was very well founded. But if you talk to your friends, if you talk to your neighbors, if as Americans we try to listen to one another and hear what other people are saying, it can be very difficult. But at the same time, we simply live in different realities. When somebody comes up to the courthouse to me, who I've known for years, and says, Jeremy, how's the wife? How's the family? How's this? How's that? By the way, why are Democrats okay with having children getting sex changes at their school? And they say it with a straight face. We simply live in different universes. There are too many information systems out there for us to agree on everything. There are many people who agree with this administration and all of the things that we're talking about, their tactics towards lawyers, not because they're evil, not because they're bad, but because they are listening to some narrative that the other side is not. So I do think that is the 40,000-foot view of what is truly broken here. And going back to the very first question that you asked, Bruce, the fact is that even if all of those things are completely true, the fact is that you're still out of bounds by sort of taking these shots at law firms. Even if you think that the whole world was out to get you, even if you think that the previous administration just had the entire Department of Justice politicized and weaponized, an executive order that says, I don't like who this law firm is representing, and I'm going to order the attorney general to get in their business. To me, I have a hard time thinking that is anything other than out of bounds.
When Politics and Power continues, a look at what's happening at the Department of Justice. Longtime DOJ employees being dismissed or demoted. Is Donald Trump's multi-pronged assault on the department undermining the central tenets of the U.S. justice system? Be right back with Jeremy Rosenthal. Welcome back to Politics and Power. Bruce Hamilton, along with Jeremy Rosenthal, nationally renowned prosecuting and defense attorney and legal analyst. Jeremy, the Trump administration has fired, demoted, and reassigned career investigators and prosecutors across the DOJ. He continues to move rapidly to politicize an institution over which the president has reportedly said he has an, quote, absolute right to control. Does he?
He is the chief executive, and I don't know that under the Trump versus the United States opinion, which came out last year, which seemed to essentially suggest, if not outright say, that the executive has more power than it's ever been given before. I don't know that he is wrong, that he has the ability to shape and control the Justice Department. That said, this type of structural damage, this type of structural change is very difficult to undo if you can undo it at all. Talking a few minutes ago about the modular system of private law practice and how individual lawyers can come and go from law firms and how big sections of law firms can kind of be rearranged very easily. That same is not true from the Justice Department. The Justice Department is one organization. It's an organization of a lot of long-term dedicated professionals, many of whom are in it for their retirement, many of whom are in it for the insurance, many of whom are in it because they believe in the mission. But once you start hiring, firing, promoting, demoting folks for whatever reason, it's very hard to undo it. It's very hard to it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle. And the longer the duration of this, the harder it will be essentially to put it back together.
I want to look to history a bit here. Much of the DOJ's work is guided by internal norms, not laws passed by Congress. These norms were put in place after Watergate to protect the department's independence from politics and ensure its decisions to investigate and prosecute are based only on the facts and the law. Oversight by Congress and independent inspector generals can expose when the department strays from its norms. That implementation ultimately comes down to the principles of individual department employees. With what's going on today in 2025 under this administration, can facts and law, not politics, play a critical role in decision-making?
We certainly hope that it would. And I would tell you that American history is a long, long, long road, right? And we've had in this country 200 plus years of history, the vast majority of which, Bruce, I have not been around for, neither have you. So I think that a lot of times what we have to understand is that what we're watching right now is a moment. It's a moment in history. This moment may last 2 years. It may last 10 years. It may last 30 years. But I also think that if this calculation by the Trump administration is wrong, if the people don't want this, if people tell their elected officials that they want more oversight, then in maybe not this term, but the next term or the term after that, it may be that there are some legally mandated safeguards within these departments that are able to provide a framework of some checks and balances for this type of politicization, which is just another way of saying that what we're looking at right now is just a moment in history. And if history teaches us anything with this country, it's that nothing lasts forever, including times where the executive has more power and authority than it's ever had. We don't know if this period in American history is going to last 2, 5, or 20 years or 100 years. But at some point, you would think that it would have to recede and come back to Congress having a lot more power.
You mentioned Jack Smith. The mass firing of Special Counsel Smith's team has gotten significant attention, and deservedly so. What message did that send for investigating or prosecuting any potential misconduct involving the president?
Donald Trump has made it clear that if you go after him, that he's coming after you. And at this point, I think it's made it clear that that he's going to pin his ears back, and he's going to come after people who he feels like has wronged him in the past. In his first administration, I think you recall that I believe it was Jeff Sessions had a special counsel appointed, Robert Mueller, to look at some issues with Donald Trump. I don't think you'll see anything like that in this term. I think Trump has surrounded himself with people who I don't think are going to do that. And it sends a clear message to anybody who is thinking about sort of investigating him or looking at him critically that he's not going to be a wallflower about it, that he's going to take an aggressive approach to you.
In 2020, Trump tried and failed to use the department to hold on to power. Pam Bondi refused to say that Trump lost the election in 2020. President reportedly considering a third term, totally against the Constitution. Does the ouster of career department officials create another more insidious potential threat that Trump and his allies would use the department to hold on to power in future election cycles?
It's hard to know their big plan, and it's hard to know whether that's something that folks ought to take seriously or not. I think when Donald Trump goes and talks openly about a third term, it does a couple things. First is it lands on a very sensitive nerve source for progressives, for liberals, for Democrats, who would tell you this is what they've always feared. This man thought that he actively tried to overturn an election that he legitimately lost. He has a fascination with dictators, with people who are power hungry. I think what Republicans would tell you is that, well, he's trolling, he's kidding, he's trying to maximize his power within this session, and that he's got some ulterior motive to do it. Also, I think they would point out that many presidents did in fact seek a third term prior to the 22nd Amendment. Even after the 22nd Amendment, I believe Harry Truman tried to get an additional term, but bowed out, I think, even before the primaries. So the idea of a third term is not necessarily heresy. The 22nd Amendment makes it illegal, but this idealization or this the desire to serve another term is certainly one that we have seen in American history. I think that's what conservatives would tell you. But when you stack the deck in the Department of Justice, do you make it more likely that he could somehow try to take the reins of power improperly? I don't know that, and I don't know that that's his intent. We've not seen that, and he has not suggested that. But when you politicize the department and you put in very loyal people at every level, you give yourself a lot of flexibility if you've got motives that are like that.
Liz Oyer, the DOJ's former pardon attorney, said, "This multi-pronged assault on the rule of law is very scary. It appears that the damage is going to be generational in its impact. Can the department regain its independence, or is this a problem that is generational?"
I think we have to go back and again remember that we live in this period of time, and what we're watching is temporary, as all things are temporary. I don't know if this is 2 years, 5 years, like we were talking before, or 100 years. We simply don't know that. But the rule of law is important. It's important for us to understand and know that when Congress passes a law or the Supreme Court says that this is how something goes, that we do it. And we do it for no other reason than it's the right thing to do. And in this country, we respect and we listen to what judges tell us. And you do see a lot of, I don't know if it's shadow boxing is the right word for it, but you do see a lot of interplay here between really the Supreme Court and I think the executive. There's a book, Bruce, it's called The Least Dangerous Branch. It's by an author by the name of Alexander Bickel. It's from the 1960s, the early 1960s. And essentially he argues that the least dangerous branch is the judiciary, and it's the least dangerous because they don't have an army. They don't really have a way to enact or enforce anything that they rule or anything that they do. We have to follow the judiciary because we believe in them. And the judiciary knows that the more political the issues get before it, the more people are going to tune it out. The problem we have today is that you've got a chief executive who is essentially governing by executive order, which, to put it in basketball terms, for the Florida Gators, who should have lost to the Texas Tech Red Raiders, and that's another topic.
People need to know you're in Texas, so.
That's right. Yes, and I'm a Red Raider too, and we had you guys, but that's okay. Glad you guys were able to get the ring. But to kind of use a basketball analogy here, Donald Trump is driving to the hoop an awful lot with these executive orders, and you're going to draw a lot of fouls. That's why you see the judiciary ruling continuously on a lot of these political issues. That's not healthy for the rule of law. Regardless of what side of the debate you prefer, the fact that the judiciary is settling so many issues that are political in nature is simply not healthy. Now, it also may not be long term. That's, I think, what we have to remember. If we have, for instance, if Donald Trump, if the Republicans have a sweeping victory in the House and Senate in 2026, then you could actually see legislation that makes it called the Gulf of America. You could actually see a push towards a constitutional amendment ending birthright citizenship. But those would be, in a legal sense, at least something that is, if you're going to change something and you change the Constitution, we can't debate it anymore, and it's not going to go before the courts. On the other side, if the Democrats are able to take control of the House and the Senate, then you could see some contrary legislation that comes through. Do they have the ability to override the executive? Are they going to have those kinds of numbers, depending on the issue? So what we're seeing, again, is very temporary. And what you see also is the courts are probably trying to avoid issuing orders that they know Trump is going to ignore for the reason that they want to preserve the rule of law. And I don't know how much of that goes through Neil Gorsuch's head or Brett Kavanaugh or Sonia Sotomayor when they're ruling and they're debating these things. And they say, look, guys, if we throw up a stop sign that we know that this guy is just going to run through, then we're really setting up America for a long-term headache here and a long-term problem. We don't want to trigger a constitutional crisis that we know we're going to lose. So let's not do it. Let's keep our powder dry, and let's hope that in a generation that this cycles out. I don't know that that's where the judiciary wants to be, but these are the types of things that I think legal scholars kick around.
I think Sonia Sotomayor and some of the conservative justices have very different mindsets. And I know that John Roberts is very concerned about his legacy. Let me end on this note. Do you think that the Supreme Court maybe created the situation that we've got right now with its ruling where they basically declared that a president's immune from prosecution when exercising the core powers of the presidency? Immunity meaning a person cannot be prosecuted. It's not merely a defense to prosecution?
That's a bit of a chicken and an egg analysis. I think the justices would tell you that they followed the law and that they interpreted the Constitution as they felt was appropriate. I think you've got a chief executive who thinks or sees, look, this legal opinion, Trump versus the United States, this fundamentally reshapes the executive branch. And I think there's a lot of truth to that it may very well. And he's taken it for a spin. And he's being very aggressive with it. Now, is that because the U.S. Supreme Court said you can do this now? I think progressives would tell you that wouldn't matter. Donald Trump was going to behave this way either way when he got into the Oval Office. And I think some of Trump's supporters would tell you that no, this is because of the new powers or the new latitude, if anything, that the Supreme Court has given him from last year. It's a great question, Bruce. And again, a real chicken and an egg, a sort of dynamic, I think, that's going on there. But we will see as this thing comes into more focus, we'll see just what stop signs that the courts throw up that this administration really takes heed of. And and heeds if they do.
The term constitutional crisis is frequently bandied about, and people question whether or not democracy is being compromised. Are we anywhere near that point? Are we anywhere near a constitutional crisis?
I don't think so. You would have, in my mind, a constitutional crisis where the chief executive ignores the U.S. Supreme Court and does so in really an unapologetic and blatant way where there is simply no argument other than, no, we're not doing that. In that instance, you would have your tiebreaker would be the legislative branch, who has the ability to impeach. And going back to the citizens, going back to the voters, going back to the viewers, if you don't care about it, then your leaders won't either. And if Donald Trump, if the chief executive decides that he's not going to pay attention to the U.S. Supreme Court, and your senator also doesn't care, then nothing's going to happen with that. You would have a really true crisis, if you will. If you look back at Watergate, I think that would be a lot more critical of a crisis, right? Where we're ordering the president of the United States to turn over tapes. And if the president of the United States does not do that and ignores that, then you've got an actual policing issue, right? You've got a criminal justice issue, and you've got a man who is functionally above the law. If the Trump administration were to ignore a Supreme Court order about freezing funding or giving funding or making, make it the Gulf of Mexico and not the Gulf of America anymore. If that's what your crisis is over, then there's only so bad that's going to be. Not that it's ever okay to disregard a court's order, but I don't think that we're in crisis territory now. The administration has said that they will not violate court orders, or at least not U.S. Supreme Court orders. So we're not quite there yet. In a perfect world, we never have these discussions. But the world's not perfect, and that's why we need lawyers, right?
Are we stepping up to the line?
4 years is a long time, and we don't know where this goes. But again, I think that's part of what the U.S. Supreme Court is also weighing. Unfortunately, or not, it may be part of their mindset to say, look, are we setting America up for a crisis here? Maybe the best thing for the courts to do for the preservation of the United States, for the preservation of the rule of law, maybe the best thing to do this moment is to do like these law firms are doing and sort of knuckle down. That could be part of the mindset that goes on at the U.S. Supreme Court. We would all hope that that's not the case. And there's 9 of them, not just one of them. But they may also be looking towards the long term of the republic, not just this next year or the year after.
I think the last public pronouncement from the Supreme Court Justice John Roberts may have been a pronouncement where he said, look, I'm very mindful of what's going on, and I'm watching, and I'll only let things go so far.
Possibly. And at the same time, you have this ruling from Judge Boasberg, I believe, and apologies, I think I'm getting them confused. I don't believe it was Judge Boasberg that ordered the government to bring back the improperly deported person from El Salvador. The administration said that they're not going to do that. The judge, the federal district judge, imposed a deadline to do that. And the U.S. Supreme Court essentially neutered the entire debate, basically giving it back to the lower judge, telling the lower judge that you could order the administration to make a good faith effort to get this person back, but you can't tell them how to do it. And I would be really surprised to see the administration. I don't think we're going to see a tariff imposed on El Salvador unless you give us this guy back. Right. I don't think we're going to see that.
Yeah, the analysis I read was that the wording from the Supreme Court was vague enough that, they weren't saying bring him home, that there was some latitude there.
That's exactly right.
Because I'm not a legal analyst, but yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that order is such that the administration, it avoids a constitutional crisis is what that order does. Is it says, lower judge, you're right, but we're not going to give you anything that you can really use to pin the administration in the corner with. And is that on purpose? Is that so this thing doesn't, is that so this thing gets simmered down? I don't know. What I do know is that we have a man who never should have been deported, that's in a cage in another country that we're not going to be able to get back. It doesn't sound like anytime soon.
Sounds like the Supreme Court staying out of a political decision to me, but again, what do I know? Jeremy Rosenthal, always fascinating, always appreciate your time and putting things in proper context and giving it perspective. Appreciate you. Hope you have a great day.
You too, Bruce. Thank you.